Welcome to the Elevated Frequency Podcast, where we are bringing you insights, information, and personal stories regarding how we can actually use the collective knowledge base that's out there right now to elevate our frequency one new step at a time. So I'm here with my lovely co-founder, Lisa Kirby.
Hello.
Hi, Lisa. And of course, I'm Shannon Morse. And today we are going to dive into this topic that came a little bit organically a couple weeks ago. That's all about lab testing and how we are seeing that sometimes it's a data trap, and the lab testing and the fixation about what labs are saying and the data in that sense can actually keep people stuck, preventing them from actually just like chopping wood and carrying water and just doing the needful of the basics before they start going in and getting medications and prescriptions and supplementations and all of these things that will be essentially a Band-Aid way of addressing the issue, when really what needs to be happening is focusing on some of the underlying causes and then working your way back. So, Lise, as we were kind of thinking about this topic, we were having a conversation, and there was an individual that came through with a discovery call. When you think about what you're seeing within our company right now, and you're running Awaken Your Cycles right now, which is another 12-week program that we have where we're looking at blood sugar and CGM monitors and all these things, but you're also getting a lot of these clients of ours sending you their labs. And so what is the general kind of collective way of interacting with these labs that you're starting to see as you go through some of these new programs we're offering?
I think a couple things. Well, one, it's like, how many times have we gone to the doctor either at their request to get some labs drawn? Maybe you go to a primary care physician for like annual labs or a yearly checkup, and maybe you get an email or you get a printout, and you're like, okay, great. What does this mean? It's kind of left this hole for people to seek out more support in, number one, interpreting these lab results and what they mean. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the doctor, even, while I was pregnant, or, they run certain diagnostic tests for safety, blah, blah, blah. And one of the tests, the first time I had ever heard this, it was like, so on the lab test, it's going to say that you're probably vitamin D extremely deficient. We'll only call you if your levels are actually, where they should be. But otherwise, just assume that you're deficient. And I was like, wait, what? I'm like, that doesn't sit with me. I was like, why are they deficient? What does that mean? How is that? I had 100 questions. Yeah. And I thought it was so strange that it was like, oh, the majority of people are vitamin D deficient, so we won't even let you know. That's just the assumption. We'll only call you to tell you in the rare case that you've actually met your vitamin D level.
What?
Right? Kind of strange. And so these are, I think people have become frustrated with the system for so many reasons, and why we've seen this huge uptick in people looking for alternative support for their health. They're looking for nutrition coaches, functional doctors, etc. I think the trap now that we've come into in the last 10 years is people have now gone down that route with functional nutritionists and functional doctors, but instead of maybe prescription medication, it's turned into lab tests and supplements. Now they're stuck in that cycle, and now they're dropping even more money because it's not covered by insurance. So I was talking to this woman on a discovery call, and she had requested, I'd love to work with a coach who knows how to read labs, and I plan on getting that done. And I was like, okay, I hear that, and we can do that. We can provide that. And that will probably be the least amount of time we spend, where the area that you need the most support is actually looking at your daily lifestyle habits. What are you eating? When are you eating? When are you sleeping? How much are you sleeping? Are you moving? Are you active throughout the day? Instead of getting hyper-focused on the labs and then looking for these kind of extreme solutions like supplements or cleanses or detoxes. So it's a it's not even a mindset shift, it's a paradigm shift of moving from outsourcing all of your empowerment and your intuition. And we're really teaching people to turn it back inwards and like look to yourself first. So I know, this is a huge theme for just like all of our programming. Have you seen that as well, Shan, like working with one-on-one clients that might get stuck in that area?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Like people don't talk to me so much about labs because it's absolutely not my specialty. So I'm not like, hey, let me see your labs.
Yeah.
However, I know that as they are relating to some of these readings, like for example, I have people in my life who live and die by certain readings and certain labs or tests that they might have. The behavior around it feels similar to how we relate to the number on the scale. For some people, that there is this value, this worth, this association that if X equals this, then there must be something wrong. And therefore I have to take these somewhat extreme measures to fix it. But it's actually bypassing the root issues that might be there. And for some people, like even inside of like for doctors, for example, and this is a conversation that I've had with doctors, that they will be so in their usual rhythm pattern that if someone comes to them and like, for example, the surgery conversation that I had a while back, I was discussing with the surgeon that it'll take a year for this whole regenerative cycle to happen for cartilage. She was already telling me it's going to take a year for you to fully heal. I saw that with Rafa's Achilles tear, it took him a year to heal fully. So we understand this, and yet they're not correlating it with nutrition. So that wasn't even like a thought process that she was having. And when I said it to her, I said, okay, well, I'm going to supplement in the same way. And I'm going to think about my nutrition in the same way because I'm still going through my recovery and inflammatory cycle. And she was like, it's so funny. I didn't put that together.
Wow.
And, she is someone who knows that she only got a day of nutrition education. Of course, there are many things where their education went so much deeper into like tissues and all of these sorts of things. But as it relates to the baseline nutrients and what's actually going to support and the quantity, I think that's what's really missing for a lot of these tests is that first of all, they're not talking about, okay, this is what you might want to introduce into your diet, or very few of them are. But then even further than that, they're not diving into the amount. Because even with the CGM, the continued glucose monitor that we're seeing with people, with most of these, the glucose monitors right now, if you're tracking food, it's not equating for the quantity of certain things that you're tracking. And I think that's one of the biggest differences that we actually get to support clients through is understanding, hey, you could have half an apple with like a turkey salad, whatever, and your blood sugar might be fantastic. If you had a whole apple, it might be a very, very different story. But if people don't know that, then they're like, oh, I can't eat apples anymore if they're wearing a CGM, right? Because they don't understand that there's a quantity piece to it. And to this, what we're seeing, and this is why we wanted to talk about this, is because if someone has been in that cycle of being addicted to taking these tests and taking these labs, they're not actually seeing the day-to-day action. And they're completely like, it's like that's in their blinders. I had a conversation with one of our clients who's using a CGM, and we looked through her CGM profile and her glucose profile for a few days. And she was like, oh yeah, I eat protein all the time. And I was like, well, let's take a look, shall we? And she was amazing at logging. She was amazing at tracking. And the first half of her day, there was whole foods, but there was zero protein. And I was like, okay, so quinoa, we know that doesn't count. And amaranth also doesn't count. And then you're mixing those with prunes. And so then we have some protein in your evening, and we can see that your blood sugar is kind of responding to that. But at the same time, you've been loading up your body with these foods that you are thinking in your mind based on the labs that you've done that they are going to be good for your digestive system. But that doesn't equate to your blood sugar.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like your labs could be solving for one thing, but it's not this holistic perspective.
Yes.
And man, is it confusing. Like, I'm not knocking anybody. Like, this is
Right.
high level confusing shit that we're trying to decipher. And doctors aren't even like, they don't have the full picture either. So this is a tough one.
Oh, you are so spot on. It's we talk about a lot too. It's like having more data doesn't necessarily mean better if you don't know how to interpret it and take action. So that's that kind of loop you can get stuck in, is getting all the tests done, or even using something that's even more real time, like a CGM monitor, or even but some really cool like hormone tracking monitors that will give you a multi-hour in one day reading of
Yes.
estrogen, progesterone, and some of your other reproductive hormones. So at least like the technology is shifting and getting better,
Yeah.
but still you need to know how to interpret it. And then behavior change is like, it's this whole other piece. So you need to know what does it mean, what to do, and then how do you implement that? I find it really interesting to see almost this like cognitive dissonance now, where you can really see the data with a continuous glucose monitor, and
Yeah.
then still making choices even with the knowledge that you do have, and
Mhm.
still making choices that are not in alignment with kind of the goal at the outset of looking to balance blood sugar, which helps your mood and weight loss and muscle building and sleep and all these other kind of goals. So it's kind of like it's really holding up a mirror of reflecting back to you. Your behaviors in real time are impacting your readings. And now you're at this point where your stories don't work anymore.
Yeah, totally.
Some of the stories coming up are like, I'm doing all the things, I'm eating well, but my readings are all over the place. And then, we keep chatting. Oh, I'm only sleeping 4 hours a night. And I'm like,
Right.
hey, so we can't ignore that. And now you're seeing evidence of it, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that piece as well, I think is so, so important of like tying it in together and really like making the most of the data. And not to toot our own horns, but I think we do a really fantastic job of not just giving people blanket advice of like, oh, you just need to cut carbs. It's like, no. There are a million things that spike your blood sugar, and it could be any of these.
Mhm.
I also feel like for so many lab tests, one, a lot of these values were created, you should have this percent value. They were just arbitrary things that we created
Right.
many, many years ago. One of them being like our percent daily value for protein was
Mhm.
created during World War I or World War II, when we had like a severe protein deficiency. And so the government set it super, super low because people were just getting none of it. They were just eating carbohydrates and, like cheap grains and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
even looking at some of these, lab test numbers and daily values and recommendations, I still feel that there's even more bioindividuality in there as well, where it's like, maybe your body needs more of that or less of that. So kind of, it's like taking that information for what it is, but don't forget to check in intuitively. How do you feel after you eat this thing?
Absolutely. I love that you're saying that, because that's right. There's so many things that are outdated. So
Yeah.
many things that are outdated. And as I think about that, it makes me think about like how we are helping individuals to identify like the amount of protein, carbs, and fats that would be right for them based on their body. And of course, there's a general equation that we start with, but that equation changes with every person, also at many phases of their life. So as we get older, what we do know through studies is that women have a harder time like breaking down and metabolizing protein. Same with men. So as we get older, we might actually need to increase our protein because we're absorbing less. But if we have a general recommended intake of protein, for that example, that's a fixed number. That's not going to transfer as we change. So I think that's such a great point, because the needle is always moving, both for the individual and for us throughout our life and for us just as a culture. As our food changes, as the soil quality changes, our requirements of our daily vegetables might actually double because of the malnutrients of the soil. So there's so many things that we can consider. And that is a little like, I keep coming back to like, hey guys, it's a little maddening, to be honest, but that's why we keep coming back to how do you feel? Just like you're saying, Lise, like keep coming back to how does this feel in my body? And the more and more that we do that, the more that is going to be the default instead of, oh, I had a lab test and it said this. Because you know what? Sometimes whatever test you get done, there's going to be discrepancies, there's going to be errors, and you can't base your opinion of yourself and your health 100% on what a lab says. Yes. For example, when we first did, and I'll use the CGM as a specific one, but when we first did our CGM monitor experience last year with our team, my levels were like what we would consider normal for a mesomorph who was strength training, who was insulin sensitive. My glucose would respond appropriately where it was supposed to. If I was in a hypoglycemic state, I would feel it. Like I was like, oh, this is fascinating, And then we did it again, and my fasting glucose was almost 10 points higher. And I was like, what's going on here? And yeah. And you were like, you could be pre-diabetic. And I was like, what? However, when I started to dive into it, I was like, oh, and I was on this kick of taking hot baths every night and also super hot showers in the morning. And I realized that I was spiking around that time. And then once I got out of the hot bath trend, my fasting glucose went back to normal. And if I hadn't done that, and if I hadn't gone through the whole understanding of what actually changes our glucose levels and done that with the group that we were in and had all of that data that we were able to collect, I would have looked at that and gone like, oh my God, there must be something wrong. And based on this like small amount of information that we have, now I need to change all of these other things that are actually working for me. It's just this one thing over here.
It's like you were saying the other day, when you have just enough information to be dangerous.
Yes.
You take this little nugget of information, but you don't have enough knowledge or experience. I like to think that, at this point, every year in our business, we've helped thousands of people. Like that's mind blowing to me. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how much you can retain. And we start to see these patterns and we know what to look for. It's why our program is so successful. And so seeing not just like one time, N equals 1, but also these patterns of all these data sets from thousands of people we've supported where we can look out for things like that. And it's interesting you mentioned the baths, because one of our clients wearing the CGM, she's doing sauna, hot tub, cold plunging, surfing, all these things. And I'm like, girl, I don't even know if we can even look at this data. Like you're changing your body temperature like 5 times a day to an extreme level. Like we might not get the same readings. I'm just going to go ahead and guess that based on how high her blood sugar is spiking. And even just last week, we stayed at an Airbnb and the pool was not heated and it was cold. And, I checked with my husband. I was like, it's cold, right? It's not just like girl cold. I'm like, it's cold for you too. And he's like, oh yeah, this is frigid. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to jump in. I'm wearing the CGM. I want to see what happens. Yeah. My blood sugar was dysregulated for 24 hours. Wow. I jumped in twice, did the cold plunge, hot tub, back in the cold plunge.
Wow.
And I'm like, nothing else changed. I kept the variables low because I actually didn't anticipate my body was going to do that. And it was like, no. And not to say, that it's a bad thing, that kind of blood sugar response is a stressor. Any kind of extreme change like that, like exercise is a temporary stressor.
Yeah.
However, I didn't enjoy it that much. It's like, I don't have a strong intuitive calling. And, be healthy and thriving without it. I'm like, maybe at another point in life, I might try it, but it was just so interesting to see my body responded immediately and then how long it lasted. And then the more time away from it, it was gone. So
That is a really, really great example with things like the trends that come through the hot and cold plunge whole experience. I intuitively have been like, no, thank you.
yeah.
There's nothing about me that goes like, that sounds like an amazing idea. Yes, let me dunk my entire body into an ice bath. I'm not interested. Not because I don't like to do hard things also, just that one in particular, my body is like, no, period. And as we've started to hear more and more specifically about how it can affect females at different phases in their menstrual cycle, it's another one of those things where we can get on these trends like peptides, like whatever it is. And for some people, it's going to be effective. For some people, it might have a lot of benefits, but it just all comes back to you got to figure it out for yourself. And just because everyone else is doing something does not mean that you should be doing it. And you also can't compare yourself to anyone else. For example, I'm running our Awaken Your Nutrition group right now, and we had a really beautiful call last week that was about having flexibility when we go out to eat. And in that conversation, one of our clients was referring to me as I was sharing with her how I think about going out to eat. When I go out to eat, I have an awareness of what the rest of my day has entailed. I have an awareness of the kind of activity I had during that day, the activity I'm going to have the day after. And so I keep all of that in mind when I'm choosing what I'm going to have at my dinner or my lunch or whatever that dining out experience is. And her mind was basically saying, that's so much work. That's so much work. There's no way that I would ever want to experience something like that. Like, I basically just want to be hands off the rails, just going, woo, I'm eating out, and I can relate to her. She was like, I don't want to, this is the thought. If I want to look something like you, Shannon, this is what you're telling me, that I have to think about things in this way. And my thought was, first, you're never, ever going to look like me. That's just not in the cards for you. You're going to look like a different version of you. And that's how this works. But that also means that that different version of you is going to be based on the different things that you choose, but that is specific to how you want to live your life. Like, that's how I like to live my life. I like knowing why I'm doing something. And if knowing why I'm doing something helps me to make a very fast decision spontaneously, if I decide, I don't care. I'm going to have the whole pasta, and then I'm actually going to have dessert, and I'm going to feel fat and happy afterwards, whatever it is.
But that right there, my first thought now goes to, but how does she, okay, do that, and then let us know how you feel. Do you feel like garbage the rest of the night and the next day? Because it's almost like you get to a point where the pain of some of these behaviors becomes greater than what I feel like the small amount of effort required to kind of just be mindful.
Yeah. But it's like, not small in the beginning.
Yes. I agree. It's not automated yet. Yep.
Yeah. And so that's the interesting thing, is taking that decision to do the initial work.
Yes.
To bring awareness to all of the different places where there's a lever to be pulled, essentially, whether it's sleep or food or caffeine or working out or sunlight, whatever.
And this is exactly why what we had that aha moment on was, wow, that's the work, right? It can feel jarring. It can feel like a lot. Anytime you learn something new and you're changing behavior, okay. Like it's not necessarily a small thing, and it's a process, and you have to stay consistent. But where I think some people get stuck is, instead of doing that and facing that, they go to the labs, they go to the data, they look at the scale and they get frustrated and they say, F it, I'm just going to eat my meal. But the
Yeah.
real work is just what you're saying, is staying in the conversation, looking at these little moments, these behaviors,
Mhm.
these thoughts we have, and that's kind of occurring all throughout the day. That's
Yeah,
the work.
absolutely. I know.
Really you can't get around it, because we have people coming to us still who are taking peptides, who have done the lab supplement route, and they're still not seeing the results they want. Or maybe they lose like 5 to 10 pounds, but then they hit a wall
Mhm.
and they can't get past it because they've never done the in-depth work. Even working with a dietitian, I remember working with one in my 20s, and she had me track my food for 3 days. And I had 2 meetings with her, met with her the first time, and then I tracked my food and she gave me just general guidance, and then
Mhm.
came back and met again for 30 minutes. And she looked at my stuff and she said, here's some more general guidance. And that was it.
Yeah.
That doesn't teach you. There was no guidance about like meal sizing. It was hyper focused on like quality and a little bit of education around like some of the nutrients in food, but not how much I need, how to space meals,
Right.
anything about how do you integrate this kind of information into this day-to-day experience to actually make change.
It's a full-time job for both coach and client, and that's the reality. The way that I think about it now as it relates to this, I kind of feel like it's a decision process. You take the red or the blue pill. You either choose to essentially stay like ignorance is bliss in some ways. When you choose to stay in denial, and there's no judgment about that either. You just may not know why you're not seeing the changes that you want to see if you're over here. You might get lucky sometimes. Some people get lucky. They figure something out. It's like one thing, and that has a cascade of events that causes benefits in other things. They could have that experience. But when I think about it, even like weighing on the scale, weighing daily on the scale, this is something where we're bringing awareness specifically to this one area. And it's very easy to have an emotional reaction that's based on a story that says, if I weigh this amount, that must mean I'm not worthy. I'll never make it. This will never work for me, whatever the story is around that thing. But then when you start to actually take that daily measurement and bring your awareness fully into something that beforehand you were choosing to not look at because it was easier to not look at it, it was easier not to face that part. Then once we start to actually bring full awareness with a supportive container to understand why it's doing what it's doing, then we can actually start to build the personal empowerment of understanding how it actually changes based on decisions that you're making every single day, which would be the same with labs, which would be the same with the CGMs, the glucose monitor. Oh my gosh. But I kind of see it as, and this is an analogy I've been using a lot lately, where if you had a wooden table that was in your dining room and everyone was sitting around this table, and let's say the table is symbolic for a lab test.
Mhm.
But what you didn't see was all of the roots that were from that table that were going through the floorboards into the earth and that
Mm.
were attached to these different things underneath your home. And so you're sitting there at the table just going, oh, the table this and the table that. But yet you are not talking about the other 90% of what has actually created that table. So that is the bigger thing. But so many people are either not ready to look at the roots, or all they have ever been shown is the table. So
Yeah.
they don't even know that the roots are something to consider. Some people have never even heard of a CGM because it's
Yeah.
fairly new right now. Some people are just now learning about circadian rhythms. Some people are just now learning about different hormonal influences. Some women are just learning about their follicular cycle. Some of
Us
these things
in
are,
our 40s.
yeah, some of these things are so new. And so for some of them, when we're sharing these pieces of information, they had zero idea that that was something to consider.
Yes. And we can wax on all day philosophically about how honestly it feels when you look at history and how we've evolved. It feels like the last 100 years.
Mm.
It's like slowly, whether intentionally or not, we've been disconnected and out of sync, out of touch with our intuition, with knowledge passed down and wisdom passed down to us from our ancestors. It's like we've become these like sterile, almost robotic creatures. It's like where's the soul? Where,
Yeah.
like all I want to do these days is just reconnect. I'm feeling such a strong pull. Yes, the data, the AI, like it's beautiful. It's
Mm.
awesome. These are incredible tools. And at the same time, I am going so much more inward than probably I ever have with
Mhm.
just quieting my mind, grounding in my body, taking advantage. I was watching some of our workshops, like the somatic practices, and
Mhm.
so that voice is honestly, when I think about like the mind that wants to fix everything and it's very logical and it's like, let me look at this lab and I will wrangle this into, being solved, versus the voice. I'm personally feeling more in touch with the voice of my own self, my higher self, intuition. It
Yeah.
is a totally different experience. I remember thinking like, how can you tell between the two? And I'm like, oof, you will know. I finally feel like, okay, I know. I'm getting chills right now. It's like a full body. It's like a feeling
Mhm.
of in my head. And
Mhm.
there's so much clarity and charge with it.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's also that piece where we're kind of melding the two worlds, like not saying that labs and these things don't have their place. They absolutely can and do, and not forgetting that other piece. And so in this beautiful process of looking at things on this minutia, the details, and looking at things on this minute level is just, if you do it with anything, it's such an incredible awareness process of
Yes.
really awakening. I
Yeah.
was thinking about it even just like another analogy, like a tangible analogy, how I used to feel about money, which was also like food, where I didn't know anything about managing money. I was never really taught that. When I became an adult and had to manage my own money, I would just not look at my bank account. I would overdraft all the time. I'm like, I'm so scared of this thing. I don't know. I like half the time think it's evil. It's something I don't have. It's something I want. And so I would just not look at my bank account. And then I would get calls from my dad like, hey, you overdrafted again, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I would just not look at it. And then it was like, I had to completely change my relationship to the thing. That's how you heal it. Same with food. I remember thinking like, oh, I'm just like part of the body positive movement. I don't care anymore. I'm just like, I'm going to eat whatever and like blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I did that and I felt like absolute trash. So I've done that too. And that didn't work.
Yeah.
It's not until you look at the thing, like weighing yourself on the scale, like in all these instances. And so if you're using labs or other distractions as a way to avoid getting
Mhm.
at the thing,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
you're
denial.
being in the loop.
Yeah, totally. It's the blinders and the denial. And then what's tricky there is that whatever reality that you are then living from is living from a false belief.
Yes.
When I think about it in the balance of denial and projection of our reality. So if we are in denial about what's actually occurring in our life, then what we're experiencing as a reality is based on the limited understanding of what's actually occurring. And so what we're projecting as our reality is coming from that limited place of denial.
Can you give, I know exactly what you're talking about. What would be an example of that with like food, or like this thing's causing me to be overweight and it's not really that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had a really interesting, we had I have a real time example with a client, which is so cool. Um, but she's in a growth mindset. So she didn't necessarily have a uh, denial based belief in this particular circumstance, but she is rewriting her story around what the number on the scale means. So she's literally in the middle of that. We know kind of what that story sounds like when it's active. But in this example, so, her goal is weight loss. She's weighing daily. She started weighing daily in about like week 4 or so, just because of that initial energy and emotion that she had attached to the story around the number. So she was weighing daily, understood that our weight has to do with the amount of food that's still in our intestines being digested, water, carbohydrate intake, sodium intake, inflammation of muscle tissue, that will have this like expanding and contracting thing going on if we're doing more exercise than we've been doing, if we're in a heated environment, like she's incorporating new types of movement and she could have a natural inflammatory process that's happening in her muscles. So we're talking about all of these things, and her weight is going between 0.2 and 0.8 ounces over the course of a week. And she's like very trusting. She's like, okay, I am freaking out on the inside because nothing's changing. And, but I'm also trusting the process. I know this is a long game, et cetera, et cetera. And then she shares with me, what? I just had this idea, this thought that I've been taking these THC gummies every night for the last 7 days. And I was curious if that could be making a difference with my weight stalling. And my response was, why, yes, it can make a difference because it slows gut motility. Mm-hmm. And, that can be great if you need more time to absorb nutrients. Not so great if our goal really is allowing your body to metabolize and release body fat. So that was literally on Sunday. So she stopped Sunday night. Monday morning, she's down a pound.
Wow. That is amazing.
Yay. So here's the thing. If we didn't, like that example with the THC is a part of the roots.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. Like there are so many parts of the roots that are creating our entire health journey. We can't just go, oh, lab said this, but it wouldn't show that, you guys. So then what? So in that would be the example. So if we didn't have that piece of reality, if we weren't fully bringing our awareness and attention and learning how to listen to the body, being open to considering possibilities. But she was the one that came to me, which is so cool. So she was the one, she was like, I haven't ever listened to my body like this before. And it was a consideration that I thought of this morning.
That's such a beautiful gift from a client when they start to kind of, I call it, I have been calling it in Awaken Your Cycles. Like you're going to be like Sherlock Holmes. Mm-hmm. You don't want to change too many things at one time, but you're kind of looking at, okay, I've accounted for these things that I know that are going to keep my blood sugar stable. And if all of these are in alignment and there's only like a few kind of outliers left, then we're going to look down here. And those are things like the harder things to kind of tease out would be like sleep, stress. I think stress would be the hardest one.
Stress is the hardest one. Yeah.
Yeah. Where it's clearly, for some readings, I'm seeing, they're having massive spikes even without carbohydrates at the meal. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. And then starting to have them track their mood. And then I see the correlation of like stress, right?
Yes.
So I love that analogy. It's really looking at the roots, and maybe the table up top is kind of what's presenting. Here's a quick snapshot in time of your lab results, which I could go off on a whole tangent just on, even looking at each micronutrient that we test for and how, some micronutrients are not stored in your bloodstream, and, they're maybe not an accurate nor necessary test that one needs to get, and really kind of bringing it back to almost this trust in your body, where if you focus on these foundational practices and to get your nutrients, including sunlight as a nutrient and some of these other things, and quality sleep, that your body will start to direct you of, hey, all of a sudden you're starting to crave a little salt. maybe you need a little more salt.
Yeah.
Starting to like listen and fine tuning there. But in order to have that, you have to have that foundation of basic needs being met, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's a big conversation. I think if we can summarize, if you guys are into some of this data that's out there, I mean, some of it can be so beneficial and helpful for us. And just like supplements, we wouldn't recommend taking supplements if you aren't getting your foundational nutrition habits in check first. You're wasting money if you are supplementing a poor diet.
Yes.
So, same thing with labs. If you are taking labs and then supplementing with medication or actually supplements without addressing the nutrition, which is going to be effectively 80% of the things that will actually make a difference. If you were looking at the equation of medication, supplementations, food, hydration, all those sorts of things, you can do so much with your food intake. You can do the majority with your food intake. And so if you aren't looking at that, and if you aren't understanding some of like the balance that's required, the balance of protein, carbohydrates, and fats, water, food quality, knowing where your food is coming from, if possible, really trying to remove some of your highly processed or packaged foods when possible, the refined sugars, preservatives, seed oils, all of that kind of stuff, and really kind of going into the basics, you will likely have more success in whatever you do than if you're just focusing on labs and then supplementation.
Yes.
So we would highly recommend that if you are one of those people that you perhaps like just flip the order.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from a personal perspective, I had my first set of labs done in January. And I was like, wow, this is kind of funny, And I put my lab results into Chat GPT and it gave me some beautiful lab, shares. And generally speaking, everything was fine. And I didn't need a lab test to tell me that. Like,
Yes.
you know, like sometimes if I've gone through phases of my life or periods of my life where I feel like my nails are brittle, like my skin might have irritations, like there was a period of time where I had this thing called tinea versicolor that was coming on my skin and it was like looked like little cheetah print spots. And it was just a yeast. And it was a yeast that was forming on my skin, likely because I was eating too many jelly beans. And then I was like, okay, so I adjusted my diet. I actually got the surface of it treated and then it hasn't come back. But at least I have an understanding of kind of what's going on. And I just take things as they come and manifest in my body. And when you're that aware and when you're going like, well, that's not normal, like you can tell. You can tell if your face feels puffy, like you can tell if your hair is falling out, if your eyesight's doing weird stuff, like it's all a sign and signal. So instead of just looking at your labs going, what is my body trying to tell me?
Right.
And then look in there.
I want to make that a t-shirt slogan of like, I don't need a lab to prove that I'm stressed. That was, we were going over cortisol in Awaken Your Cycles and the different varying levels of like the high cortisol, but at the wrong time of day and things like that. I'm like, you could go get a lab done. You could go get a Dutch test. You can get this like 24-hour dried urine thing where you have to pee and then dry your pee. And I'm like, if that sounds like a lovely way to spend your time, like you could do that. And if you're continuously waking up in the middle of the night and you're not, and your sleep is crap and you're anxious and you're puffy and, some of these symptoms of high cortisol, you could just focus on solving for that, and skip the test route or get the test. And then, whatever feels like the pathway for you. I think I've kind of drifted more towards, old me would be like, yes, all the tests, all the data. And now I'm kind of like in the middle, and really getting more and more in touch with what you're saying, those little signs and signals from the body. I can tell now, like I had dairy when we were traveling last week, like milk dairy, which is rare. I rarely drink it. And it was like immediate. I was like, woof, like congestion. It changed my bowels.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, this is this is next level awareness when you're able to identify. I'm like, I know exactly what I changed, and I'm seeing an immediate response in my body.
Yeah.
It's such a gift, and it's like you get that for life.
I know.
I mean, it kind of takes for me personally, it takes so much fear out of my body.
Yeah.
And it's more just, I feel so much more secure of being in tuned and kind of knowing where to go without having to always feel like I'm relying on something outside of myself for the truth.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, that really is the beauty of the gift. And it takes work to get there.
Yes. Yes.
You know, unfortunately, it's not what we learned when we were little. It's not the way that our medical or health system is designed. It's not designed to give you the power. And so, you know, it makes sense to me why the majority of people who come have a little bit of a struggle when they start to realize how much awareness that they have to give to their daily actions in order to arrive at that place of personal empowerment and of ultimate like freedom of, I know what my body is trying to tell me. I'm at a place where now this makes so much sense to me. I can bob and weave throughout my day, and I know that I need more rest today, or I'm going to skip the gym, or whatever it is. No thank you with that glass of milk that you're trying to give to me. But in order to arrive at that place, you got to go through all of the trials and errors a little bit.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking about this the other day too, that a lot of people who we support come in and they self-identify as, oh, I eat healthy, I eat clean, I strive to eat organic, and I source, good food. But that's just one piece, There's so much more to look at beyond just food quality.
Oh my gosh. There's so much. I mean, we'll do another podcast about awaken your strength, but as I'm writing this, I'm just going through and going, oh my gosh, you guys, there's so much to tell you.
Yes.
With every little lesson, I'm like, and then there's 5 other things to talk about. And that's the dynamic experience of health. It's like, it's never ending. You're never like, oh, great. I mean, you and I know this so well. We get one certification and it just opens up 10 more rabbit holes to dive down. And we're like,
I have a 5-year trajectory plan. I'm like, I already know what I want to focus on for the next 5 years. Yeah, there's so much more. There's so much more. You can always go deeper.
if you guys are into going deeper, you know where to go. Because we just continue to dive down the rabbit hole.
Right.
Yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed this little chat we had today about lab tests. And at the same time, we're not demonizing or vilifying it. If you guys do have questions about labs, you can contact us to ask Lisa what type she would actually recommend for various things. And also, if you're looking to like really flip and start to look at the roots of something, then you can look at some of our programs, Awaken Your Nutrition, Awaken Your Cycles, and coming up in May, Awaken Your Strength. So thank you guys for your time and for listening. Thanks, Lise.
Thank you. See you next time.
See everyone next time.